Right, here we are testing out the autofocus with this 85mm f1.4 from Sony. I've been testing it for a few weeks now. We've got a few things to talk about with this one. It's an interesting one. If you look online, you'll either see people absolutely raving about it, comparing it to the high-end options, and others, yeah, not that happy with it. Where am I in this conversation? We're going to find out. But as I said, video autofocus test, so I'm jumping out the frame, jumping back in. Let's see if I can fill the frame with the box. How is that doing? That might be too close, but yeah. And this is with my A7 III, as you can read. So yeah, how is that? Now we're going to go back in time and look at this thing up close and then get the samples on the go. Let's crack on. Okay, so we have guarantee card and instructions. We don't need any of that. Silica gel, we don't eat any of that. And the lens itself, well packaged. Plastic, fantastic. Right, plastic, fantastic it is then, but it's quite a heavy bit of kit. Should be around 746 grams. I might double check that shortly, but that is an absolute beast. Snap cap there, it's already got a bit of dust. 77mm filter thread, 98 centimeters minimum focusing, f1.4. That's quite clicky. Oh, yeah, I like that actually, quite nice. 1.4 to 16 in the A. That is quite noisy. And your focus ring, nothing to write home about. We do have a little bit of a seal there, but this thing is not weather resistant. USB-C there. 12 diaphragm blades, 13 elements in 8 groups, so that is quite interesting. But look at this absolute beast. It's got an STM focus motor, so we'll see how we get on with that. On the side, that's okay, the AF MF switch, and we've got a customizable function button there. Let me just fling it on my A7 III so we can see just how huge this thing is. I mean, look at that. Doesn't feel too bad in the hands, if I'm honest, but we've got to get out and give it a real good bit of play. Oh, there's something I want to test first. Let me just fire it on. I just want to hear something. I think we're going to have to do it this way. Is it in? There we go. Oh no, you can barely hear it. There were a lot of complaints about the noise. I mean, nah, you can't hear it. If I turn it, try and focus it, can't hear a thing. Seems perfectly fine. Yeah, let's get out and have a bit of a play with it then. For a rather large lens, I think it handles pretty well. For me, the narrower part actually helps me to rest my little finger better while my hand takes the bulk of the lens. Weirdly, I find myself knocking the AF MF switch a lot. But otherwise, it's pretty good experience, albeit, again, it is rather large. I think it's almost as big as my head, maybe. Now, autofocus is a weird one. For the purpose of an 85mm focal length and its usual targets, I think it works perfectly fine, but this was probably one of the worst autofocus performances I've experienced this year with Sony lenses. So the keeper rate was lower than usual, but of course, Sony being Sony, even the A7 III gives this lens a good performance overall. Sharpness wide open in the center is pleasing, though you need to get to around f5.6 to see the best performance across the frame. There is a lot of detail to work with though, and you can really get those eyes to pop nicely in the right light. Color rendering basically excellent, contrast very good. Chromatic aberration is low and distortion is minimal. Now, vignetting is present wide open, but no bother, goes away completely by f5.6, or it's easy to edit out. Flare resistance though is average at best. Not that we're getting a lot of sun this time of the year, it's getting grim in the UK. Bokeh, now I think this is an important one for this lens, you know, it's a 1.4. It's not quite blowing me away, or at least at first, but the beauty of spending a good amount of time with a lens is being able to test it in different conditions and with a fresher brain. And I'm actually basically loving it now. The specular highlights can be cat's eye shaped, which seems to be controversial these days, but I find them pretty clean, and even when there's a lot in the background, it's not that distracting unless I go wild with the composition, of course, as I have on purpose in some of these samples. Now, smooth textures blur away nicely, almost creamy, as we used to say about a Nikon 85mm f1.4. Now, I prefer the textures over the specular highlights, but then, you know, that's probably just a personal preference. But what do you reckon from what you've seen from this lens, especially if you've tried it yourself? I have to say, I'm really falling back in love with this focal length. I used to shoot 85mm lenses on my full frame Nikon cameras way back in the day. Actually, I loved my 85 f1.4, which fell twice on concrete and kept going a treat. That was a magical and tough lens. That said, if you really must buy a brand new autofocus 85 1.4 for Sony, then you can get some great images with this, albeit not ultimately the best. If you're happy to step down and not lose that much, the 7 Artisan 85-1.8 that we looked at before is a good alternative. Touch less magic, but maybe a touch sharper overall. Now, interestingly, before I had the Nikon 85-1.4, I had the Nikon 85 f1.8. I think this was around 2009, thereabouts. And honestly, it was a similar situation. I loved my 1.4 and it was truly magical. But the 1.8 was a great lens and it was smaller, which was a bonus. Anyway, I digress. We're here to talk about the lens. Now, this goes for anything from £362 to $539, depending on the offers. At the low price, it's an absolute bargain if you're primarily shooting stills. At the top end price of $539, I think it's still worth considering. Basically, Samyang have the nearest alternative, and that's $648. Then you're looking at Sigma for $979, and then Sony at a whopping $14.99. The latter will be better for all-weather work, of course, but it's quite a price jump. Now, I haven't used those lenses enough to say for sure how big the difference is, but having used this maker a lot, I think this is definitely worth looking at, especially if you can't pay more.